Moving to a new area teaches you essential life skills. For example, it teaches you how to adapt, how to become self-reliant, how to meet new people. Now, in today's podcast, I talked to Igor Fossa, a 32-year-old Brazilian man who moved to Canada when he was 21 and then a few years later moved to Ireland. We talk about how moving to a different country presented him with a series of challenges, and these challenges helped him grow and to develop as a person. Now, we also talk about how these are the types of challenges that young people, particularly those on the verge of adulthood or those who should be on the verge of adulthood, need to embrace. Where did you grow up in Brazil?
So my city is called Porto Alegre.
Okay.
It's at the very south of Brazil. It's close to Argentina and Uruguay.
Okay.
And yeah, it's the capital of Rio Grande do Sul, which is the state. First time when I left Brazil was about 2013,
And you're
and
and
I
you're
was
how old? Remind me how old you are.
around 21. Around
Okay.
21. Yeah. So I went to Canada, where my sister used to. Well, she still lives there, but by the time she was living in Calgary, and that's the place I went. I spent some time there with her and with her boyfriend by the time. So I spent there about 1 year and a half. I went to study and work. There was this program. I was actually the last batch of people got uh, who was able to get that type of visa. So I went to study and work part time, and yeah, it was my first experience leaving Brazil. Well, I've been to some South American places before that, but not to leave and not to do this type of thing. And yeah, was probably one of the best experiences I've had in life because um, I was away from home. I was alone in a way, and a lot of challenges and problems start to happen. But met so many people. I did a lot of things in many ways, like job wise. I don't know. I paint houses. I wash cars. I work in a barbecue, and I did a lot of things. And after that, I actually tried to stay there.
Right.
Um, I applied to I applied to get into college, did all the exams to get accepted, and then I could ask for the visa, and I did that, got accepted, asked for the apply for the visa, but then got denied. And once they reply with the rejection, they just send you a letter, and they pretty much don't give the exact reason. They just
Right.
said it was denied and you have to leave the country immediately.
Time
And
to
they don't
leave.
give them even a time. Yeah. So
Wait, when
I
you say it,
spent,
when you say immediately, how soon is that?
they actually say immediately. They don't give any time.
Oh,
Yeah. It's
now
literally the
you got.
word immediately. Yeah. They don't
Oh,
say you have a week, a month, or two to leave. No, you have to leave immediately. So I was like, okay, that's kind of concerning. I didn't know what to do, but yeah, after stop and thinking about, I was just like, yeah, I'm not gonna leave tomorrow, of course, but
right, right,
I think I spent 1 or 2 months because I also wanted to save some money because I knew I had to go back to Brazil.
right,
But yeah, I spent about that time just working and saving until
right.
I leave. And yeah, that was very disappointing. And by that time, I really thought I was gonna get it, but it didn't work out.
So you're in Canada. You come back to Brazil. You go back to Brazil because you've been kicked out of Canada. Well, I don't want to I don't want to say you've been kicked out. They've said that
That
you
was
were
pretty
not.
much.
Yeah, well, I mean, you hadn't done anything other than apply and ask if you could stay
Yeah.
longer. I mean, there is a distinction between that and doing something illegal. So I want to be clear. um, right. So so you went from you'd been in Canada. You went at the age of 21. You got to experience a different culture, and you were developing all these skills living independently, which I would recommend to anyone. And then you come back to Brazil. And then who are you contacting? How do you end up getting to Dublin at this point? Did you know people had been to Dublin and said, "Yeah, this is a good place to show up"?
Yeah, so before I leave Canada, I had this friend I made in that Brazilian um, barbecue restaurant. We weren't in contact much for some time, but then we end up meeting somewhere and then just do going out for a few meetings. And I told him what happened to me after I got that letter. So I told him what I was thinking about, maybe coming to Dublin, and he also had the same idea. He
Wait,
was
but
actually
was
leaving
this back
Canada.
in Brazil? Did he get a letter
No, that was
saying
in
that?
Canada.
Oh, this was in Canada. I
Yeah,
was wondering if it was standard for Brazilians to get a letter saying leave immediately. maybe they
yeah, no, I
maybe they send them all out at the same time, and Canada Airlines gets booked, for the next couple of months with going to Rio de Janeiro or something.
they're just finding all of them and yeah, send them away. But yeah, no, I think it was just his plan of leaving Canada and just going somewhere else as well. So it ended up being a coincidence that he also was planning to come to Dublin. So yeah, we made this agreement about whoever arrives first there, is gonna show up the other the place and those kind of things.
Okay.
So I went back to Brazil. I wanted to spend less. I wanted to spend maybe 3 or 6 months, but I ended up spending 9 months in Brazil,
Right.
and that's when I came to Dublin. But when I came in, I didn't know anyone beside this guy, and I
Wait.
remember I told.
I gotta ask something. So you were in Brazil for 9 months, and then you arrive in Dublin. What was it like to deal with the weather when you arrived in Dublin? And I say, I'm from the Northwest, right? I'm from the Pacific Northwest, Portland, Oregon, and it's very rainy and it's quite similar. But but we do have seasons, and so but there's a certain dreariness, I should say, about the Dublin, or there can be about the Irish weather. In Kerry, it's very green, but I remember going to Dublin and thinking how gray of a city it was. So what was just you arrive in Dublin after 9 months in Brazil? What was that first impression like? I just have to ask.
Yeah, it was weird because in Brazil, obviously, it's completely different. In Canada, I experienced the extreme cold, but it was
Right.
still sunny, was still very green, like you said, especially the
Yeah.
city I was.
Yeah.
And so when I was here, it was just like, yeah, there's no weather. It's a very old place, and it's raining dump. It was first days was tough because of that, but especially because it was the end of the year, so it was already cold. Was raining. I remember my first day. I I went to meet this guy in Temple Bar, and it
Uh huh.
rained for a few minutes. It wasn't
Right.
like he always does. Like he rains for 10 minutes and then stops.
Right.
But yeah, my impression was that wasn't really how it would look for the whole year, but I was wrong. once I got here, I had the English school, but then I had to look again for jobs.
Okay.
And but I only knew that guy, and he wasn't able to help me by that time. So I just made a new CV, filled out everything I had to, and printed out a bunch of a bunch of sheets of for my CV, and then just went walking in Dublin, going pub to pub and restaurants, just talking to people and giving my CV, until I got something. I remember that was a few days I walked so much that it was just like I was about to give up. I just was like, I can't talk to anyone. No one wants to just hear me out, at least hear me out. Um, I'm pretty sure, when you go to a place and you just ask to talk to the manager or whoever's in charge, they say, yeah, the person is not here. You know that the person is lying, or
Right.
they
Or
just
you can
don't
just leave
want
your
to talk to
CV
you.
and yeah.
Yeah, and you can leave our CV. I'm sure that by the time I left my CV and turned my back, the person just threw in the bin or something,
Right. Right.
because they never call me back. But yeah, so I ended up getting a job. My first job here was in Ed Rockets, just close to where I used to live.
The burger place.
Burger place, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
Well, one thing now, this may not seem very very appealing, but one thing that I think that everybody should do in their lives is, well, there's a couple things. Work in a restaurant. If you work in a restaurant, you can. If you work in a service industry, you can appreciate how hard people work in the service industry. And the other thing is like what you did is cold calling, is having to walk in and ask. Now, I didn't actually do that until I'd gone to Ireland, and I'd split up with Kian's mom, and was split up with Kian's mom. And but I remember that I had to go to schools, walk in with just a brief little CV and what I could do for the schools, and yeah, it takes energy. So, because
yeah,
the whole and Kian, I remember doing the same thing, that when he was 16 and he was struggling to get a job at the time, and so he was bringing out his CV everywhere, and he said the same thing. But you get used to it. But I remember what I did was I would decide I'm going to go to 10 schools today, and to find 10 schools and driving all over, it pretty much took it took almost the whole day before the school day got out. I mean, I couldn't just and the other thing is you couldn't show up in the morning, because that's not a time that you want to approach a principal, but that I would have to go knock and say, hey, is there any way I could talk to the principal right now? And most of the principals were teaching principals, and I would as forcefully as I could, but with manners, say, hey, it would be really helpful if I could talk to the person. And yeah, and you're talking, and you're just trying to sell it and sell it and sell it. And it is definitely something that it will develop a lot of skills, and you get and so if cold calling's not fun. But boy, when you've done cold calling, it's one more thing. You're like, if I can cold call, I can do this other stuff. So it is a pain, but I know this sounds like a bit of a cliche, but it is definitely a character development skill. So when I came back to the States after 16 years in Ireland in 2021, I ended up coming back here because I was working with schools, and all the schools didn't actually close. They closed for about 2.5 months. But when they reopened, they couldn't have they couldn't hire somebody from the outside to come in and work with the students, which I'd been doing for 15 years at that point. So I ended up moving back to the States so I could actually earn some money and eat. Now, when I came back, there was a very curious thing that I'm trying to make sure I'm not going to use. I'm not going to. I'm when I'm saying all this stuff, I'm trying not to use any names, because the only person I ever want to call out is me, and or make fun of me or something like that. But when I came back, a number of people were telling me about their young men, their sons or cousins and things of that nature. And I was introduced to this term called failure to launch. And did I ever tell you what failure to launch means?
No.
Okay, so failure to launch simply means that they're not getting out of the house and becoming adults. And it's primarily a problem with males. There's some females, but I think the majority, and I could be wrong with these statistics, it's about 90%. But a good friend of mine, his son was living with his mom, and he was doing nothing all day, and he's 22, 23 at the time. Another friend of mine, this kid ends up living with his dad, doesn't work to this day, he's not working. And that friend of mine told me about a friend of hers whose son had daughters and a son, and the son was living at home. It was in Ireland. You can't throw a rock and find somebody who doesn't have a problem with if you're a guy going through the family courts. In the States, it seems like you can't throw a rock without hitting somebody who doesn't know about some young man who's sitting at home not doing anything. So I was just shocked, because I was going, well, why don't you just tell them they have to? They got to go. This is what what troubles me here, because I know what it would have been like when I was growing up, and I know what it would be like more or less in Ireland. I'm not to say that I can cite some exceptions, but what would happen in Brazil if a kid is just going, no, I'm dealing with problems and I just can't go to work and I'm going to sit around? I mean, what would be the response of the culture, family, friends, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think your parents will probably hit you in the head and just tell you to do something about it. And I honestly, from when I was growing up, there was no such thing as having a mental issue and not able to go to work or go to school, or doing something that you're supposed to do, especially as a kid. Because I remember I used to say once we started working, talking to my friends, I was to say that we were happy and we didn't know, because when you're a kid, you only have to go to school, study, and all your bills are paid. You have no issues, you have no problems. So once you start to live the life, then you know, and you realize how hard it is, and which is okay,
Which is
nobody
life.
said that life, yeah, life. Nobody said that life would be easy anyway. But yeah, I think the expectation is that yes, the kid needs to do something. You either go to study or you go to work, or if you can do both, great. But yeah, I think culturally and your parents or your family would expect you to do something for sure.
I mean, one of the things I want to come back to is that you had mentioned that, when you were growing up, there wasn't talk about mental issues. Now, obviously, I had written the book Roundabouts and Firewood. I've discussed that on the other podcasts, and about the mental struggles I had. And the point I was making, though, that was, yeah, you got mental struggles, but the one thing you got to do is you got to battle those. And one of the things you battle with is you got to engage in life. It wasn't an option for me to go, oh, I'm really depressed and my OCD is killing me, so I'm not going to go to work today. So to be clear, I think raising the consciousness of mental issues is really good. But when I came to the States, the thing that struck me was that mental issues become this excuse. And it's not as if people throughout the ages have not had mental problems. But we still had to go to work. We still had to show up, and that's what I go. Well, what do you mean you're just going to sit in bed all day because you think that you're overwhelmed. Do you think sitting in bed all day is going to change that? So that struck me really early on, the idea that mental problems become this excuse for not doing stuff. And mental problems should be the reason that you need to go do stuff. When you're young, I mean, we were 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, those late teens, early 20s, when you're young and you're healthy and you have tons of energy, that is the time to go out and take the chances. I mean, you should always go off and take chances, but my gosh, you have no kids, that's the time you live broke and you figure things out. And like you said, you take whatever job, you learn how to do stuff. I remember when I got done with my teaching program, as I said, first thing I did is I went to North Carolina. Then a year later, I was on the Oregon coast. And then a few years later, I moved to New Orleans. But it was always these places. And as you said, when you go to these places, it's exciting and there's that thrill of it. And I worry that one of the things that concerns me is that particularly with all the phones and the video, that people are choosing comfort over adventure.
I think the excitement of being there with everything new, different environment, is just kind of makes you keep going and not care about many stuff that you have to go through. So, for example, I would be down to do anything as a job, for example. So once I got this opportunity, I just accepted, of course, and just went. And you go through so many stuff that nowadays, thinking back, you would say, "Oh, I'll probably never do that again," or I was so stupid to accept that offer or to do that stuff they were asking me to do,
Oh, that never stops either. Let me tell you, at the age of 57 to be 58 in July, that never well, for me, like, I'll never do that again.
Yeah.
And then, a year later, I choose something stupid to do again. But just so you know, well, that could just be me.
But I think it's about that as well. You make decisions, you make mistakes, and then you learn from it and keep going. That's where we were talking about the young kids not wanting to do anything or finding excuses. That's the exact age you should be doing everything and trying everything and just making mistakes,
But anyway, so you get a job at a old fashioned. It would be like an old fashioned burger place in I think 1950s burger place in the States. So anyway, so go from there.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Just before that, that accommodation I got for $350. Also, I only paid in advance a week for that because
Right.
I couldn't afford to pay more.
Oh yeah.
And I was thinking, wow, once I'm there, I can find something else. And then I remember I had to leave the accommodation on Saturday, and I remember it was Thursday, and I was walking down Capel Street to go to the Leafy because I knew there are some hostels there that are really cheap. So I was just going to book a hostel there for a few days that I knew was about, I don't know, maybe 20, 30 euro. So as I was walking down, I saw this guy, and then I had to look twice because I didn't believe what I was seeing, and it was a friend from, I think you call third grade. So I saw this guy from
someone
third
who's
grade
like from
in Brazil.
Right. So somebody you knew when you were 8 or 9 years old.
Exactly. So I looked at him, he looked at me, I was like, what the hell you're doing like in Dublin? Like, well, how weird was that? So we started chatting, and after a while, I told him what I was going to do at that minute when we met, and he told me he knew someone that was renting rooms close by. So I ended up talking to the person he knew and got an even better deal than a hostel. So that was pretty good. But I was desperate by that time. I had 3 days to leave, and I didn't know where I was going to sleep after that.
And you start with getting a job in Eddie Rocket's 50s type American diner, and then Nando's, a place that specializes in chicken. And then you keep working and you keep working, and you eventually get because of your EU passport, university is much cheaper. And so while you're working in IT, you go back. And then what did it take? Am I correct that it took 4 years of while you're working at your IT job, and then doing school for 4 years to get your is it digital marketing that you got your degree in?
Yeah, right. So it took me actually 5 because
Oh, right.
Yeah, I did another course also between. And
right, I remember that.
Yeah.
Right.
I did a course in DCU for computer science for a year. Then I went back to this one. But yeah, it was about that, working, studying part-time on that degree, and then working full-time.
So I want to say thank you so much to Igor for having this conversation with me. And I know that we'll be talking more in the future. And as I had told him earlier as I had mentioned earlier to him, I don't know if I did it on this recording, but that I would, there's a friend of his named Gift who has a really interesting story, and hopefully we might be able to get him on the podcast. So Igor, thank you so much. And we'll be chatting soon.
Thank you, Scott. Yeah, chat to you soon.